Hello and welcome to this Against the Storm tutorial on buildings and blueprints. As I mentioned in the introductory tutorial, this series will be covering all aspects of the gameplay, all of the various features and mechanics of the game. However, with the game still being in early access, some of these aspects may be altered slightly or greatly throughout the development period. When that happens, I plan to provide some kind of update, either with an updated video tutorial or at a minimum as a pinned comment. With that said, let's get started. Before we start, actually, I would like to mention that this is about building selection and building choices, not specifically about the building interface panel. I'm going to defer that component to another tutorial, possibly the next tutorial, because the choices there have more to do with recipes and ingredients and things like that, rather than the actual building selection process. So instead here we're going to focus on blueprints and building selection. When you first launch into a new settlement, you're given three blueprints or three chances to choose a blueprint. You're offered, depending on their state of the game, you're offered one of 3 or 4 blueprints. I'm showing 4 here because this is in the save that I have been working on in Epic. So I have an additional bonus blueprint option that is offered to me that isn't offered at the beginning of the game. Before the end of this tutorial, we'll actually go into a beginning game so that we can compare the difference. So you're offered 3 chances as one of 3 or 4 blueprints as part of this. Oh, that's new. Forgot about this button. You can also see the conditions of the biome you're in using this icon over here. So if you're looking at, say, do I want an herb garden, which is not actually a good choice here, or a good example here, but a trapper's camp, or do I want an herbalist, or do I want a I don't know, some sort of production building instead? Well, you can come over here and say, well, if I want to get meat from the ground, the natural resources list over there, I'm going to need to take the trapper's camp for sure, and also I'll be able to pick up the bugs and the eggs with it as well. Or maybe the herbalist is a good choice, or maybe not. Herbalist picks up mushrooms and berries, so maybe that is a good choice. And so on. You can kind of make that decision as to what you might want to pick here based on these conditions, as well as just comparing the things here. So once you come into this screen, there's a few things to consider. A gathering building is always a good choice, especially at the beginning of the game, assuming that the materials it can gather, like this trapper's camp, are things that you're going to be able to find on the ground. Now, if the things on the ground don't include meat, then maybe you want to just get by with the camps that come with the game by default, the scavenger camp, or come with the start by default. The insects are picked up at I'm drawing a blank on the name of the camp now. So maybe you don't want to invest in the trapper's camp. So maybe you want to cross that out if you're in a biome that doesn't include meat on the ground. For the herb garden, or something like the herb garden, which is a gathering building, a farming building rather, if you're in a biome that has lots of herbs available, which I believe would be like the Scarlet Orchard, maybe the herb garden's not as good of a choice. Maybe instead you want the herbalist, because you want to just get the herbs that are grown wild, and instead you want to save time and save this blueprint choice for a different kind of farm. And then there's the greenhouse, which produces mushrooms and herbs, regardless of the season, regardless of the biome. And then the 4th slot here is always your wild card. If you have a 4th slot, it's a wild card. It can literally be anything. So this is the screen where you choose your first building. And just for the purpose of this, I'm going to choose the trapper's camp, and I'm going to let the second choice come up. And this choice contains all production buildings this time. And this is where I'd like to talk about star economy. If you count the number of stars available in the building, sometimes there will be 6, sometimes there will be 5. And of course the game is trolling me right now, and is showing me all 6s. But sometimes you'll see a building that has a 3-star recipe, with 2 1-star recipes. That's what I mean by a 5-star building. In a manner of speaking, those buildings aren't as good as a 6-star building like these ones, because you're not getting as much bang for your buck, that is your free blueprint, or your earned blueprint, as you would a 6-star building like these. Something to consider as you're playing through the game. Now, what choice to make here depends on what you've already chosen, what resources are available in this biome, both from the trees and from the ground, and what buildings you have to start the game with, and that largely depends on what stage of the game you're in. Once you've unlocked buildings such as the field kitchen, a recipe like pickled goods is available to you at 0 stars, so maybe that's not as important to you here because of that. But then on the other hand, in order to make pickled goods, you need a vessel of some kind. So maybe you want water skins or barrels so that you can make vessels to put the pickled goods in. And so you kind of end up with a little bit of a hierarchy of different types of recipes and different buildings where you want to take one building to produce the item that can be used in another building. Sometimes you choose a building hoping that you'll get the recipe to make the item you need to make the item in that building you want to make, and sometimes you never get it. That's the challenge of a roguelike game. Everything is randomly generated, so you may never get the thing you're hoping to get. So it's always good to come into a building choice with a couple of different strategies to make sure that that's the thing you want. Another thing to consider when choosing a building is, what cornerstones have I taken? So what perks and effects do I have down here in the corner that could either give me a benefit or a drawback to a certain building? Something like the overworked woodcutters perk. I'm trying to remember cornerstone. I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. The one where they produce 3 barrels for every 10 planks might mean that taking a provisioner, at least just for the barrels, would be a bad idea. Or even taking the leather worker just for the water skin might be a bad idea. So in this case, maybe instead of taking this building, if you had that perk already, if this was later in the game and you already had that perk, maybe you don't take the leather worker, because the only thing you really want from the leather worker is the fabric. Let's say maybe you already have a carpenter where you can make packs of luxury goods. The only thing you want here is the fabric. So really, this is a 2-star building to you in that situation. Instead, maybe the granary is a better choice, because packs of crops can be made to be sold. Pickled goods, even if you have the field kitchen already, it's a 0-star recipe. So this could really be a good recipe. This could really be a good building in that situation. Maybe earlier in the game you took the bakery where you can make pie and biscuits, but you need a flour recipe. Then the provisioner might be a better choice. So it's very hard to make a recommendation on what buildings to choose. You really have to weigh all of your options and choose accordingly. The smithy, the simple tools are used to open up caches and also to solve many glade events. Packs of trade goods can be used in orders, can be used to solve some glade events, and can be sold to the trader for a lot of money. I believe they're worth like 60 or 80 cents, fractions of an amber a piece. So they're pretty valuable items all told. So maybe this is a good choice, but this probably isn't a good choice at the very beginning of the game. At the very beginning of the game, I like to focus on building materials, so things like fabric, lumber, and bricks. I like to focus on simple cooking recipes. Pickled goods isn't bad. Things like jerky are really good. Things where you can make them out of the items you have at the beginning of the game. They're use raw materials directly as an input, no manufactured materials. From this screen, you can also see how the recipes are made. You can click on the thing here. You can see that pickled goods requires a vessel. You can see that it requires one of these 4 raw foods in order to make pickled goods. Packs of crops can be made from these 4 raw materials. Fabric can be made from these 3 materials. And you can see at what star level it is, how much of each material is taken. You can also see here how many people can possibly work here, what the cost in materials and time is to build the building, and what the specialization bonus is for the building, in addition to the list of the recipes as we saw before. By the way, this screen is the Atlas screen. There are some help information in here, as well as information about each of these categories. Each of these categories will be a tutorial in this series, and or will be split amongst multiple tutorials depending on how the case may be. This buildings listing here in the Atlas is very useful because it shows all the buildings possible in the game with this panel included. Not only the production buildings, but also the farming buildings, the gathering buildings, and the services buildings. Every single building in the game is in here. Even decorations are in here. Now, there's not a whole lot of information here because decorations are very simple, but you can tell that it's an aesthetics category, a blue category, how much it costs in materials and time to build. So make friends with the building tab, or really the whole Atlas. The Atlas is also available via the escape or this menu button here, and it's here as the Atlas. Once you've chosen your 3 initial blueprints, you will then have the opportunity to choose 8 more blueprints throughout the course of each settlement. They're awarded to you at each one of these dots once you've completed that particular reputation point. The system works exactly the same as these 3 initial ones, except you're only given 1 choice. There is 2 additional ways to obtain blueprints in the game. The first one is the trader. I don't have a trader screen ready to show you, and we will save that for the trader tutorial anyway, but suffice it to say that traders often sell blueprints for buildings. And while they do cost a fair amount, usually 15 to 20 or so amber apiece, they do 2 things for you. First of all, they give you the blueprint to be able to build the building, but they also take that blueprint out of this pool of blueprints that's possible for you to be shown here, to be offered here in a blueprint screen. So, in a lot of times, it behooves you, if the building is at all useful, it behooves you to buy the blueprint from the trader rather than just to hope you get it from here, because at least then it won't show up here in a future roll of your blueprints and possibly displace the blueprint you're really looking for. So keep that in mind. And the final way to obtain a blueprint is a Smuggler's Visit cornerstone. The Smuggler's Visit is a cornerstone that's offered at the cornerstone offering at the beginning of each year. It offers you the ability to choose any one random blueprint, any one specific blueprint from the entire selection of blueprints that you have available to you in the game at that point. It'll show up here with a star instead of a number, and that tells you that your next blueprint choice is going to be the Smuggler's Visit. You simply click on the button as you would for a normal blueprint choice, and you'll be given a panel where you can choose any available blueprint in the game. It's very useful, but it is also very rare. So before we go, I'd like to just switch into another save just to show you the difference in the amount of buildings that I have available here in my Atlas in this endgame epic endgame save from my epic save from all of the series that I've done up to this point. As you can see, all these here that are unlocked by deeds are probably all decorations, but I have many buildings. And we're going to compare that to the early game Atlas, where there are only a few. Be right back. We're here in a test save now that I have. Happens to be a Scarlet Orchard save, but that doesn't weigh on it at all. And in this Atlas, you can see that there are far fewer buildings available. There's still a lot, but there are far fewer buildings available. You can also see where you will start obtaining new buildings. Some at each level as you level up through the game by from earning experience points, all the way up to level 14. There are 16 total levels in the game, and then there are many, many buildings unlocked by deeds, most of which are decorations. Most of the essential, kind of the basic essential buildings are here. You can get by with your first handful of towns with very few buildings, in fact, and there are enough here to help you make it through those first few towns until you unlock enough experience points to level up and get new buildings. Most of your gathering buildings are available. Many of the recipes are available via various production buildings, and you have all the housing you need and all the decorations you need for that early game. One of the other things this list includes is some of the glade events that yield a permanent item. They're also shown here as converted item names, so converted rain totem, converted totem of denial, and that's because these actually act as a decoration. In this case, harmony. Actually, both of their cases, harmony, where they will act as that decoration in your particular town if you build a town close to that decoration, within range of that decoration. See my tutorial on the Ancient Hearth on how that works. So, thank you for joining me for this tutorial. Check out the rest of the tutorials in this playlist. And also take a look at my ongoing Let's Play series that I started over fresh for the Steam release. I consider that series a tutorial in a Let's Play, so I'm covering a lot of the same information there, but in a different format where it's more practical and applied rather than this being more targeted and specific to the tutorial name. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.